This morning I wanted to do a video for the parents before I did one for the children. This is video really about explaining about sound talk, because a lot of parents have been in touch and just want to have a little bit of information about what children should know literacy wise at what age, and especially about sounds and phonics and letters. So I just wanted to make a few things clear so you won't put in really hard expectations on yourself or your children, because learning is all meant to be about fun and repetition and building up these skills, not having to answer questions on the spot and being scared if you get them wrong. As we know as adults, not many people enjoy being put on the spot with direct questions over and over again, or feeling bad if we're getting something wrong. So sound talk can start at any age. As soon as you can make a sound, you can start doing sound talk games. This doesn't mean you're going to be learning your letters and your phonics, because actually that's a 40 to 60 month target. So that is just sort of around 3.5 plus. Obviously, exposure to seeing letters and hearing sounds can be from any age, but to actually be having that time to start learning your sounds and your letter names is actually in your nursery year, when you're about 3.5 upwards, and that's where your development's at, not necessarily your age. So if your either development is above or below that, it's really not a worry. You can step sound talk up and you can step sound talk down. The first thing when you're going to be listening to any forms of sounds, and these can be the sounds of vehicles, the sounds of animals, singing, learning nursery rhymes, is that you've got to be able to actively listen. If your child isn't actively listening, they're not going to be able to pick up on sound differentiation. And that's the really important bit, being able to hear the difference between sounds. So a really good fun way of starting this first is with instruments. If you haven't got instruments in your house, you can just maybe use saucepans with spoons. You could make a shaker with pasta inside a pot, anything like that. With sound talk and listening with the instruments, it's really important to see if you can have two of the same things. So 2 things that shake, 2 things that make a banging noise, maybe 2 sets of keys to do jingling noises. You give one set to the child and you hide the other set behind your back. And you make the noise and see if they don't have to explain it or say it, but see if they can play the exact same noise first time. That will show you that your child has got noise differentiation. Another game you can play is with animals. If you've got farm animals, you can talk to your children and play games and make the animal noises. You can then have a turn at making a noise and they have to select the correct animal that goes with it. So if you go, they find the sheep. If you go, cock-a-doodle-doo, they find the rooster. If you go, rah, they find the lion. Okay? They need to start understanding that sounds are different. A lot of children who listen to telly and watch a lot of YouTube will just be used to a sound at them. They won't be used to actually having to, in a way, play games and differentiate between them. Okay, to them it's just a sound. So it's really important that you play with sounds with your children. The next bit is about mouth movements. When your children are making the different sounds, it's really important that you accentuate, so you really over-exaggerate the mouth movements. So if you're being a sheep and going bah, you want to be using a really big mouth with the bah. So then they can copy it themselves. They can either do it on a video, they can do it in a mirror or a shiny surface, but you really want them to be aware of their mouth shapes. This is the same if they're finding some speech sounds difficult. Until they know what shape to put their mouth in, it's really difficult to make that shape. So it's fun, like when Charlene does her warm-up exercises, that you just play some silly games doing your ah and your ee and your ooh and it, and having a look at the different shapes your mouth makes. It's just being silly and being fun, and then children will actually want to take part and do, and you need to do it yourself as well, because they learn from our modelling. They learn their first role play games of making their little dinners and their cups of tea and their plastic food in the kitchen stuff, because that's what we do. So the first thing they're going to do is copy. So if we're not happy to do it, they're not going to do it. So once your child likes playing games with sounds, is making lots of animal noises, loves playing with instruments, the next thing you want to do is get into your singing, because singing is brilliant for rhythm, and children need to be able to recognise that when we speak in a rhythm. That way they can pick up on the way that speech flow goes, and they'll be able to hear the different rhythms that we talk in. An easy way of doing that, obviously, is singing lots and lots of nursery rhymes. You can look at different ones on YouTube if you don't know any. It doesn't matter if you do them, if your home language is English or if it's a different language. Both will work because all languages have a rhythm to them. So really get into lots and lots of singing. And then as your child's getting confident with the singing, start banging out the rhythms with them. This can be with drums, this can be clapping, this can be just banging your hand on the table. Get them to realise there's a rhythm and they can move their whole bodies to it. So if they were doing like, it would be Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. You know, get them to really start realising you beat those rhythms out and get them to copy them with them. They can stamp their feet to them, but all of that makes them so much more aware of sounds. So once you've got the sound differentiation started, you've got your mouth movement started, you're beating it out, so you've realised there's a rhythm in word. The next bit, and this is around the 30-month bit, is when they start working out about the rhythms, is they'll also start to introduce alliteration to them. Alliteration, obviously, I don't want to be telling Granny how to suck eggs, but alliteration is generally just thinking of words that have the same sound as the beginning of another word. So you could have like the cool cats or the crazy cats. You could have the tall trees. With cherubs, we tend to give all the children an alliteration name for their names. All the nursery age, the 3 to 4 year olds, already have an alliteration name, and most of them will know what that is. If they've forgotten over the last 3 weeks, please send in a text and I will tell you what your child's alliteration name is. Some of the younger ones might have them as well. If not, make one up for your child. You might have a jumping Jessica, or you might have a Tinkerbell Tiana, or you might have a Viking Vince. Okay, I'm sure you can all make up an alliteration name for your child and get them to be shouting that. We do a song where we go sort of like, ah, for Agatha, ah, for Agatha, and then you could have an alliteration name that goes with it. So if I thought about one of the little ones, Eloise, we could have for Eloise, for Eloise, and then her alliteration name could be something like Exciting Eloise. So try and make it into a game. Get your child really aware of the sound of their name. That's the next step for them, is the sound of their name. So you've done active listening, sound differentiation, mouth movements, rhythm, and now you're moving into alliteration. So you can be doing all of this constantly around the age of 3. Okay, if they're a bit younger than that, just stay playing with the sound games, with the animal sounds and things like that, okay? Because if they're really enjoying it, you'll see they'll pick it up really, really quickly. If they don't want to, not if they don't want to, that's the wrong word, but if they're not moving up, it just means they're taking their time to learn maybe just the sound differentiation. And that's really important. There's no point jumping ahead, because if you miss out the stepping stones at the beginning, eventually as you build up, your wall will fall down. So it's really important that you make what they know concrete rather than you think you have to push them ahead. So once we've got alliteration, the next thing we can go on to is other people's alliteration. So once they know theirs, so for instance, say they know that they are amazing AJ, the next thing they might do, you might do siblings in the family. You might do your own names, or your mummy name, or your daddy name, or your grandma name, and you might do like M for mixing mummy, or D for drumming daddy, and start building on your alliteration in that way. As they get the idea of it, you'll see them alliterating everything or clapping out everything. And it doesn't matter that they don't recognise the sound for this, because they don't need to. They just need to be able to hear it, and that's the most important thing. Learning all these different listening skills prepares them later for when they come to do phonics. Okay, so the last one in the 30 to 50 month age group, so this is going all the way up to over 4 at 50 months, but because every child works at their own rate, they might learn it earlier, they might learn it later, is to be able to recognise their name. Now, recognise just means they'll look at it and they know those squiggles, those shapes are their name. It doesn't mean they know the letters to name in their name. It just means if they walked up and saw their name written on something, they knew that was them. Okay? It doesn't mean they're going to be sitting there going, oh, that says Phoebe, that sound is duh, 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 duh. It just means that they'd look at it and go, ah, that's Phoebe, or ah, that's Alice. Okay? So they'd recognise what their names look like. Okay? To do this, you can play lots of games with names, put labels on things so they know it's theirs. It doesn't need to be something they're actively having to sound out. They just need to know it's theirs. You can just tell them, look, that one's your name, and that one could be your own or a sibling's or somebody else's. So they know names look different. And the game I'm going to be playing later is all about letters in your name. And you can step that down and step that up, depending where your child is at in their sound talk. Obviously, if you're still working at the below 3 level, you don't need to know anything about your name yet, other than what it is. Okay? Next step, and this is now the 40 to 60 month step. So this takes you all the way to the end of reception. So this is not something you need to be rushing in and pushing first. And also, if you haven't done the other steps, it then becomes really difficult for reading later. So the next step is your phonics. You start with the sound, which is the A, and the name is the A. Okay? So the sound would be B, and the name would be B. We always start with the sounds first. We also start with lowercase letters, not capital letters first, okay? Because when they'll say things written, majority of it is going to be in lowercase letters. Obviously, the capital in their name you always keep. Phonics, it's difficult to explain this. If you've done all the previous listening work, phonics will come quite quickly because you'll hear the sound, which means you'll be able to pick up words that have got that sound in really quickly. A lot of children learn their letters and their sounds from a very young age, but they learn them by memory. So they've been told what they are so many times and looked at it so many times, either on a flashcard or something else. They just know that that is an A, okay? But they might not be able to hear. So if I said to someone, oh, can you find me some things that begin with A? They would then find it really difficult because they're not used to hearing the sound, they're used to looking at it. Now, memory is brilliant, and the more memory games you can play, like pairs and things like that, is excellent. Really sets your children up for good memory skills. But memory doesn't help you learn to segment and blend, which is either reading and spelling. So while there's always a space for memory, getting your child to memorise lots and lots of sounds and words is great at the beginning, but unless they can hear those sounds and blend them themselves, it actually limits them, because they might get a new word, because they can't hear the sounds, they can't sound it out for themselves and work out what it is. They'll need to ask somebody what it is, and then they'll memorise it. So you're taking their independence away. Good example of this is that we had a little boy a couple of years ago who was really, really, really good at hearing his sounds. He wasn't always the best writer of them, but he could hear his sounds excellently. And I remember his mum telling me about a story about how she found him in the bath with a comic, Star Wars comic. He was only 5.5 years old, and he was sounding out all the different names of the Star Wars characters and the planets, and these are really obscure names and things, yet he was managing to sound them out himself, and he was so pleased and so confident in himself that he could do it because he could hear the sounds. So he was blending the words himself. He wasn't having to shout constantly, Mum, what's this word? Mum, what's this word? The independence and confidence it gave him is going to be much more important to encouraging children to read and really have a go at spelling words for themselves later on. So phonics that we follow at Cherubs is a mixture of Read, Write, Ink and the Jolly Phonics system, because lots and lots and lots of phonics is done differently in different schools. It's really good when you're doing phonics to do it in 3 different ways, because some children are visual learners, some children are audio learners, and some children are kinesthetic, they need to do. So it's worth doing it in the 3 ways, so whatever way your child learns, they're likely to pick it up. Again, you don't want to put them on the spot until they're confident about it, because nobody wants to learn by fear. Everyone wants to learn by fun. And if they get their confidence up and they think they're spot on at it, they're going to want to do more. If they're worried about failing or getting into trouble, they're not going to want to do it. Okay? So when you're doing your phonics, have a look at all the phonics songs. There's loads of games you can do with phonic sounds, which is on some of the ones I've been putting up on the internet. Again, really looking at the shape of your mouth. If you're doing your p, 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 or you're doing your f, really emphasise the sounds as you're doing it and play games with them. Really ensure that the child knows which one is the sound and which one is the name. Again, if you're not sure yourself, have a look on the internet, or you can send a text through to me and I can do a little video of the sound and the letter for you. If you sit there and think, oh, my child's got these 3 sounds, but they're not moving on, just keep on playing with those 3 sounds and blend them lots. Slowly introduce one more. So often we find that a lot of the children get really obsessed with s-at, because we do them at the beginning and they love them. So then they're not as keen on moving on to the next sound as in with the it and the p. So you do lots with the s-at, because they're really confident with those, and just introduce one more sound at a time, but don't take those 3 away, because they're the ones they're really enjoying using because their confidence is up there. Mixing the letters up to make funny little words is the next point, and that's when you start. You make a word. So if you were just doing your sat sounds, you could make your s-atter, you could make ats, you could make tats, and you segment the sounds. That means you tell them what's in them, and then you blend them. So you say them quietly and quickly to make the word. So you'd be there going sat, 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 until they've got the sat. Then let them do it themselves. The whole idea is about empowering, not about them feeling they've got to memorise things. Also, it doesn't have to be done sat down. You don't have to sit at a table. Sticking letters, if you've got magnetic letters, or if you've got foam letters in the bath, you can do it outside with water paint on a wall. You could even, if you've got an error or a washing line, peg letters on. You can move them around then. If you've got a child that's really into writing, obviously they can write it all down. You've really got to go with where your child's interest is, and then you're going to get an awful lot more from them. We do the first 18 sounds with the children at Cherubs. And then we obviously do an awful lot of blending. You do bring more sounds in, which are single sounds, but they come in with the combined signs as well. So you'll see that carries on through it. Any of you who are really interested in the phases and how they work, you can look up the Letters and Sounds programme on the internet, and you can see where it all comes in and what sound blends come in where. Please, if you've got any questions, just get in touch and ask. But I wanted to make this video so for those of you seeing the sound games and seeing the phonics stuff that we do, you're not thinking, well, why can't my child do that? Or that's too easy. How do I step it up? How do I step it down? And what's expected of what age group? Hope that's okay for you. Bye.